The fluorescent lights of Whitmore Academy's computer lab cast harsh shadows across 30 expectant faces as Marcus Williams approached the front of the classroom. His laptop felt heavier than usual in his sweating palms, containing months of sleepless nights and breakthrough moments that had consumed his every waking thought. The AI algorithm he'd developed could revolutionize predictive modeling in ways that even graduate students struggled to comprehend. "Mr. Williams, you may begin your presentation," Professor Richardson announced from behind his mahogany desk, his wire-rimmed glasses reflecting the glow of multiple monitors. Marcus connected his laptop to the projector, his hands trembling slightly as lines of elegant code filled the massive screen. The algorithm's neural network architecture sprawled across the display like digital poetry, each function building upon the last in perfect mathematical harmony. "This is my adaptive learning algorithm," Marcus began, his voice gaining strength. "It can predict user behavior patterns with 97% accuracy by analyzing micro-interactions that traditional models miss entirely." The room fell silent except for the gentle hum of cooling fans. Marcus watched his classmates' faces transform from casual interest to genuine amazement as he demonstrated the algorithm's capabilities in real time. Professor Richardson's chair creaked as he leaned forward, his expression shifting from mild attention to something darker. "Mr. Williams, this is quite sophisticated work." "Thank you, sir. Perhaps too sophisticated." The words hung in the air like poison. "Where exactly did you find this code?" Marcus's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, sir. This level of complexity is typically beyond the scope of undergraduate work, let alone high school students." Richardson's voice carried the weight of 40 years in academia, each word carefully chosen to cut deep. "I'm going to need you to provide documentation proving this is your original work." The whispers started immediately, a low buzz of speculation that filled Marcus's ears like static. He felt 30 pairs of eyes dissecting him, measuring him, finding him wanting. "Professor, I can show you my development process, my research notes." "That won't be necessary right now." Richardson's dismissal was swift and final. "Class dismissed. Mr. Williams, please see me after everyone leaves." Marcus stood frozen as his classmates filed past him, their whispered conversations creating a symphony of doubt that would echo in his mind for weeks to come. The weight of their stares pressed down on his shoulders like a physical force, crushing the pride he'd felt just moments before. The walk home became a blur of sidewalk cracks and autumn leaves, each step carrying him further from the person he'd been that morning. A brilliant student with unlimited potential, toward something smaller, something questioned, something that would have to prove its worth again and again. The front door of their modest duplex clicked shut behind Marcus with the finality of a coffin lid. The familiar scent of his mother's lavender candles couldn't mask the weight pressing against his chest, making each breath feel like drowning in slow motion. "Baby, you're home early." Diana Williams emerged from the kitchen, her navy scrubs wrinkled from a 12-hour shift at the hospital. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but they brightened when she saw her son, until she noticed his expression. Marcus dropped his backpack by the door, the thud echoing through their small living room where family photos lined every surface. Pictures of his father in his engineering uniform, graduation ceremonies, birthday celebrations, all the moments that had led to this crushing afternoon. "What happened?" Diana's voice carried the sharp edge of a mother who'd spent 17 years reading her son's moods like medical charts. "Professor Richardson thinks I cheated." The words tumbled out before Marcus could stop them, raw and bitter. "He doesn't believe I wrote my algorithm." Diana's hands stilled on the dish towel she'd been holding. In the silence that followed, Marcus could hear his 10-year-old sister Zoe's video game beeping from upstairs, oblivious to the storm brewing below. What exactly did he say? That it was too sophisticated, too complex for someone like me. Marcus's voice cracked on the last words, the implication hanging between them like a loaded weapon. Diana's jaw tightened, her protective instincts warring with the careful diplomacy she'd learned from years of navigating predominantly white institutions. "Your father would be so proud of what you've accomplished, Marcus. You have his mind, brilliant, innovative, always 3 steps ahead. But what if Richardson's right? What if I don't belong there?" The question escaped before Marcus could cage it, revealing the doubt that had been gnawing at him since he'd first walked through Whitmore's imposing gates. "Don't you dare." Diana's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. "Don't you dare let them make you question your own brilliance." Zoe appeared at the top of the stairs, her braids bouncing as she peered through the banister. "Why is Marcus sad?" The innocence in her question pierced through Marcus's defenses. How could he explain that the world would question her intelligence too, simply because of the color of her skin? That excellence wasn't enough when prejudice wore the mask of academic authority? Diana pulled Marcus into a fierce embrace, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We'll figure this out, baby. But we have to be smart about it. Whitmore Academy. They hold all the cards." Marcus felt the familiar tension between his mother's protective love and her hard-earned wisdom about picking battles they could actually win. Outside their window, the prestigious Academy's bell tower was visible in the distance, its shadow falling across their neighborhood like a reminder of dreams that came with a price too steep to calculate. The email arrived at 7:23 a.m., its subject line cutting through Marcus's morning routine like a blade. Academic Integrity Board, formal investigation notice. The sterile language couldn't mask the gravity of what Professor Richardson had set in motion. A full-scale inquiry that would dissect Marcus's work under the unforgiving microscope of institutional suspicion. 3 days later, Marcus sat across from a mahogany conference table in Whitmore's administrative building, facing 5 administrators whose collective gaze felt like a tribunal. The room's oil paintings of distinguished alumni, all white, all male, seemed to watch from their gilded frames as if guarding the Academy's legacy against unwelcome intrusion. "Mr. Williams, we need you to walk us through your development process," announced Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, the board's chairwoman. Her silver hair was pulled into a severe bun that matched her expression. Line by line, Marcus opened his laptop, his fingers trembling slightly as he navigated to his code repository. The algorithm that had once filled him with pride now felt like evidence in his own prosecution. Each function, each innovative breakthrough, had to be justified to people who viewed his success as inherently suspicious. "This neural network architecture here, explain how a high school student conceptualizes something this advanced," pressed Mr. Gerald Whitman, the board's technology representative. "I started with basic machine learning principles and built upon them," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the churning in his stomach. "My father was an engineer. He taught me to think systematically, to see patterns others miss." The questioning continued for 2 hours, each answer spawning 3 more inquiries. Marcus felt his confidence bleeding away with every skeptical glance, every request for additional proof of his intellectual capacity. Meanwhile, the investigation's tentacles spread throughout the school. Sarah Chun, his lab partner and closest friend at Whitmore, emerged from her own interview with doubt clouding her usually bright eyes. "Marcus, I want to believe you," she said during lunch, her voice barely above a whisper. "But some of the things they're asking, the complexity of what you've done. You think I cheated too." The words tasted like ash in Marcus's mouth. Sarah's silence was answer enough. The cafeteria buzzed with whispered conversations that died whenever Marcus approached, creating invisible barriers that isolated him from peers who had once sought his help with their own projects. By week's end, Marcus understood the cruel mathematics of institutional racism, how excellence became evidence of deception, how brilliance was reframed as impossibility. The system wasn't designed to celebrate students like him. It was engineered to question their very right to succeed. The final interview notice arrived on Friday afternoon, summoning him for what Dr. Hawthorne called conclusive testimony. Marcus stared at the formal letterhead, knowing that his entire future hung in the balance of a process that had already decided his guilt. The knock on Dr. Amara Okafor's office door came during her lunch break. Soft but insistent, Marcus stood in the hallway, his usual confident posture replaced by the hunched shoulders of someone carrying an invisible weight. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows under his eyes, aging him beyond his 17 years. "Come in, Marcus." Dr. Okafor's voice carried the warmth of someone who understood battles fought in silence. Her office walls displayed degrees from MIT and Stanford alongside African art that spoke to roots that ran deeper than academic achievement. Marcus slumped into the chair across from her desk, his words tumbling out in a rush. "They think I'm a fraud. Professor Richardson, the board, they all think I stole my algorithm." Dr. Okafor leaned back, her dark eyes flashing with recognition. 23 years ago, I sat in a similar chair, defending my doctoral thesis to a panel that couldn't believe a black woman from Lagos could revolutionize quantum computing theory. Her fingers traced the edge of her coffee mug, memories surfacing like old wounds. The questions they asked me weren't about my research, they were about my right to be brilliant. How did you survive it? By refusing to shrink, by documenting everything, by finding allies who saw my worth. She pulled out a thick folder from her desk drawer. "I've been watching this investigation, Marcus. I know what's happening here." Down the hall, Jake Morrison submitted his semester project, a basic chatbot that barely functioned, to Professor Richardson's warm approval. No questions about originality. No demands for documentation. The stark contrast wasn't lost on the students who witnessed both interactions, creating fault lines that split the academy's social fabric. "Jake's project is literally copied from a GitHub tutorial," whispered Emma Rodriguez to her friend during chemistry class. "But Marcus creates something revolutionary and suddenly he's a cheater?" The whispers grew louder, dividing students into camps. Some rallied behind Marcus, organizing study groups in his honor and wearing "Brilliance has no color" pins. Others retreated into uncomfortable silence, their privilege protecting them from having to choose sides. Sarah Chun found herself caught in the crossfire of her own conscience. In the library's quiet corners, she stared at her laptop screen, cursor blinking in an empty document where she tried to write a character reference for Marcus. The words wouldn't come because they forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about her own assumptions. "I never questioned when Jake got into advanced placement," she confessed to her reflection in the bathroom mirror. "But when Marcus excels, I immediately wonder if it's real." The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had been complicit in the very system that was destroying her friend. Parent WhatsApp groups exploded with heated debates. Faculty meetings grew tense as teachers chose sides, some defending Marcus while others whispered about maintaining standards. The investigation had evolved beyond one student's academic integrity into a referendum on who belonged in spaces of excellence. Dr. Okafor closed her office door and turned to Marcus with the intensity of someone preparing for war. "They want you to prove you belong here. I'm going to help you prove they don't deserve you." The email arrived on a gray Thursday morning, its clinical language delivering a verdict that shattered Marcus's world. Preliminary findings support concerns regarding academic integrity. Pending final review, Mr. Williams is suspended from advanced computer science and faces potential disciplinary action that may affect graduation status. Marcus stared at the screen until the words blurred together, his chest tightening as if invisible hands were squeezing the life from his lungs. The panic attack hit without warning. His vision tunneling, heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for escape. He stumbled to the bathroom, gripping the sink as waves of nausea crashed over him. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered to his reflection, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed stranger staring back. The boy who had once dreamed of changing the world through technology now looked like someone who had given up on tomorrow. Diana Williams had seen enough. She marched into Whitmore Academy's administrative building wearing her best dress and carrying 17 years of suppressed fury. The marble floors echoed with the sharp click of her heels as she approached Dr. Hawthorne's office, past portraits of founding fathers who had never intended for families like hers to walk these halls. "You're destroying my son." Diana's voice cut through the polite veneer of academic discourse. "This isn't about academic integrity. This is about a brilliant black boy who dared to outshine your expectations." Dr. Hawthorne's face remained impassive behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Williams, we follow strict protocols. Protocols that question every achievement of students who look like Marcus while rubber-stamping mediocrity from students who look like you." Diana's words hung in the air like an indictment. "My son's father died believing education would be his legacy. You're killing that dream." The confrontation left Diana shaking with rage and Marcus drowning in despair. He stopped eating, stopped coding, stopped believing in the future that had once seemed inevitable. The weight of constantly proving his worth had finally crushed something essential inside him. Dr. Okafor found him in the empty computer lab, staring at a blank screen with dead eyes. "Marcus, I need you to show me something. Your development process. Every sketch, every failed attempt, every breakthrough moment. What's the point? They've already decided. Because buried in those files might be the proof that saves you." Her voice carried the urgency of someone who understood that this moment would define not just Marcus's future, but his very sense of self. As Marcus reluctantly opened his project folders, Dr. Okafor noticed something that made her breath catch. Timestamps and version histories that told a story of genius unfolding over months of dedicated work. Hidden in the metadata was evidence that could change everything. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement and possibility. "We need to call someone, right now." The phone number she dialed would either save Marcus's future or confirm his worst fears about a system designed to break students who dared to dream beyond their prescribed limitations. The call came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that had started like any other day of academic purgatory. Marcus was sitting in the library, mechanically turning pages of a calculus textbook he couldn't focus on, when his phone buzzed with an unknown Washington, D.C. number. "Is this Marcus Williams, creator of the adaptive behavioral prediction algorithm?" The woman's voice was crisp, professional, carrying an authority that made Marcus sit straighter. "Yes, ma'am. Who is this?" "Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Your algorithm was submitted to our National Student Innovation Review Program. Mr. Williams, I'm calling to inform you that your work has been approved for expedited patent processing." The words hit Marcus like lightning, each syllable rewiring his understanding of reality. The library's hushed atmosphere suddenly felt electric, charged with possibility he'd forgotten existed. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your algorithm represents a genuine breakthrough in predictive modeling. We've had our top computer scientists review it extensively. This isn't just original work, Mr. Williams. It's revolutionary." Dr. Walsh's enthusiasm crackled through the phone. "We'd like to discuss licensing opportunities and potential partnerships with major tech companies." Marcus's hands trembled as he gripped the phone, tears blurring his vision. The validation he'd been denied by his own school was coming from the highest authority in intellectual property, the very institution that determined what qualified as genuine innovation in America. The news spread through Whitmore Academy like wildfire. Within hours, the hallways buzzed with whispered conversations that carried a different tone than before. Students who had avoided Marcus now stared with something approaching awe. Faculty members who had remained silent during his ordeal suddenly found their voices, questioning Professor Richardson's judgment in hushed faculty lounge conversations. Professor Richardson himself seemed to shrink with each passing hour, his confident dismissals replaced by defensive explanations that convinced no one. Colleagues who had once respected his tenure now wondered aloud about unconscious bias and academic blind spots. "How does it feel?" Sarah Chan approached Marcus at his locker, her voice heavy with shame and something that might have been admiration. Marcus closed his locker door slowly, studying her face. "It feels like I needed the U.S. government to tell my own school that I'm not a fraud." The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. His brilliance had been questioned by those who claimed to nurture it, only to be validated by strangers who judged his work on merit alone. Dr. Walsh's follow-up email contained opportunities that stretched far beyond Whitmore's ivy-covered walls, offering Marcus a future where his intelligence wouldn't be perpetually on trial. As he read through partnership proposals from Silicon Valley giants, Marcus realized that his greatest victory might be walking away from the institution that had tried to break him. The story broke on a Wednesday morning when a local education reporter picked up Marcus's patent filing and connected it to whispered rumors about Whitmore Academy's investigation. By noon, news vans lined the school's pristine entrance, their satellite dishes pointing skyward like accusations against the institution's carefully cultivated reputation. Prestigious academy questions Black student's genius. Patent office calls him revolutionary. blazed across headlines, forcing conversations that had festered in faculty lounges into the harsh light of public scrutiny. Social media exploded with hashtag Justice for Marcus hashtags and alumni threatening to withdraw donations. Dr. Hawthorne's emergency assembly felt like a funeral for institutional credibility. The auditorium's mahogany panels seemed to absorb her words as she delivered a carefully crafted apology that satisfied no one. The Academic Integrity Board has completed its review and formally clears Marcus Williams of all allegations, she announced to a room thick with tension. We deeply regret any distress caused during this process. Marcus sat in the front row, feeling hollow despite his vindication. The apology couldn't restore the sleepless nights, the panic attacks, or the fundamental trust that had been shattered. Victory tasted like ash when it came at the cost of his faith in the system he'd once revered. Professor Richardson's office stood empty, his resignation letter citing personal reasons that fooled no one. The complexity of his downfall troubled Marcus. Was this justice or simply another casualty of a system that demanded scapegoats rather than genuine change? Dr. Okafor approached the podium with the weight of someone carrying generational responsibility. We're implementing mandatory bias training and diversifying our review processes, she announced. This cannot happen again. But Marcus wondered if institutional change could ever move fast enough to heal wounds that cut so deep. As reporters shouted questions outside, he faced his own reckoning. Whether to stay and fight for transformation or seek his future elsewhere, where his brilliance wouldn't require constant defense. The cost of victory, he realized, was learning that some battles won still left scars that would never fully fade. The MIT auditorium held 300 of the brightest minds in technology, but all eyes focused on the 17-year-old at the podium whose story had become a rallying cry for educational justice. Marcus Williams stood where he belonged, not as someone defending his right to be brilliant, but as someone whose brilliance was undeniable. 6 months had transformed him from a broken teenager questioning his own worth into a national voice for change. The boy who had once walked home in stunned silence now commanded rooms full of educators, tech executives, and policymakers with the quiet authority of someone who had survived institutional racism and emerged stronger. 6 months ago, I was told my algorithm was too sophisticated for someone like me. Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of transformation. Today, that same algorithm is being licensed by Fortune 500 companies, and I'm here to tell you that genius has no color. The standing ovation thundered through the hall, but Marcus felt the deeper victory in the faces of young students of color scattered throughout the audience. Kids who saw themselves reflected in his journey from doubt to triumph. Their eyes held the same hunger for validation he'd once carried, the same desperate need to prove they belonged in spaces that questioned their very presence. Dr. Okafor watched from the front row, her eyes bright with pride and something deeper, the satisfaction of a mentor who had helped nurture a movement. Their weekly mentorship calls had evolved into a partnership, with Marcus helping her develop the Williams Protocol, a comprehensive framework to identify and protect gifted students from institutional bias. The data is undeniable, Marcus continued, clicking to his next slide. Students of color are 40% more likely to face academic integrity challenges despite producing work of equal or superior quality. We're not asking for special treatment. We're demanding equal recognition of our capabilities. The audience shifted uncomfortably as Marcus laid bare the statistics that most institutions preferred to ignore. His presentation wasn't just personal testimony. It was an indictment backed by research, patent filings, and the growing chorus of students sharing similar experiences through his nonprofit foundation. The transformation hadn't been easy. The first month after his vindication had been the hardest. Nights when the trauma resurfaced in dreams where he stood before endless panels of skeptical faces. Days when imposter syndrome whispered that maybe he had been lucky rather than brilliant. Dr. Okafor had guided him through those dark moments, teaching him that healing wasn't linear and that strength could coexist with vulnerability. Marcus, you carry the hopes of every student who's been told they don't belong, she had said during one of their late-night phone calls. But you also carry the responsibility to ensure this never happens again. That responsibility had crystallized into action. The Marcus Williams Foundation for Educational Equity, had grown from a simple website to a national organization with chapters in 43 states. Students reached out daily, sharing stories that mirrored his own, brilliant minds dimmed by institutional doubt, potential stifled by prejudice disguised as academic rigor. Backstage after his presentation, Marcus's phone buzzed with messages from students across the country. Aisha from Detroit, whose chemistry research had been questioned until she won a national science fair. David from Phoenix, whose coding skills were dismissed until he landed an internship at Google. Keisha from Atlanta, whose mathematical proofs were scrutinized with an intensity that her white classmates never faced. Each story reinforced what Marcus had learned. Excellence in black and brown bodies was often treated as an anomaly requiring explanation rather than celebration. But now these students had a voice, a platform, and most importantly, a community that believed in their brilliance without reservation. "You've created something bigger than an algorithm," Dr. Okafor told him as they walked through MIT's corridors, past laboratories where the next generation of innovators worked on problems that would shape the future. "You've created hope." The MIT acceptance letter in his pocket felt like vindication, but the real victory was in the ripple effect his story had created. Whitmore Academy had implemented the Williams Protocol, and 12 other prestigious institutions had followed suit. Professor Richardson's replacement, Dr. Maria Santos, had reached out personally to apologize for her predecessor's actions and invite Marcus to speak to incoming students about recognizing bias. Even Sarah Chan had found her voice, writing a powerful op-ed about unconscious bias and the complicity of silence. Her words had stung with honesty. "I failed my friend when he needed me most, not through malice but through the insidious assumption that his success required more scrutiny than my own." Marcus paused at a window overlooking the Charles River, its waters reflecting the late afternoon sun like liquid gold. The boy who had once questioned whether he belonged in academic spaces now knew with unshakable certainty that these spaces needed to prove they were worthy of students like him. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Your father would be so proud. We all are." Attached was a photo of 10-year-old Zoe wearing a future engineer t-shirt, her smile radiant with the confidence that her brother had fought to protect. Diana had quit her second job, using the licensing fees from Marcus's patent to finally pursue her own nursing degree. The family that had once scraped together tuition payments now funded scholarships for other students facing similar challenges. Marcus smiled, thinking of the ripple effect that extended far beyond his own story. The students who would never have to defend their brilliance because he had fought for their right to shine. The teachers who now recognized bias in their own assumptions. The institutions forced to confront uncomfortable truths about who they celebrated and who they questioned. His journey from victim to victor had honored not just his own dreams, but the legacy of everyone who had believed in his potential when the world demanded proof he had the right to be extraordinary. The future stretched before him, bright with possibility and purpose, carrying the voices of every student who refused to let their light be dimmed by others' limitations.